Okay, just a minute and we're going live. მოგესალმებით, მე გახლავართ სანდრო მეგრელიშვილი, საქართველოს სტრატეგიისა და განვითარების ცენტრიდან და დღეს ჩვენ გვაქვს მორიგი საუბარი ნატოს შესახებ. დღეს გვყავს ძალიან საინტერესო სტუმრები. დღევანდელი ჩვენი საუბარი იქნება ინგლისურ ენაზე და ქართულად უკვე ქართული სუბტიტრებით მოგვიანებით შეგეძლებათ ნახვა. Welcome everybody. Today we're having another session of the series of NATO talks at GCSD, which is taking place as part of the project called Talk, Research and Discover NATO. And the project, I should highlight, that is funded by Polish Embassy, which is NATO contact point embassy in Georgia. And once again, I would like to highlight that we at GCSD are very grateful for that. So today we're going to discuss NATO-Georgia relations, and we're happy that we are joined by special guests. By Mr. Khavieer Kolominna, which is Deputy Assistant Secretary General for Political Affairs and Security Policy at NATO and NATO Secretary General Special Representative for the Caucasus and Central Asia. And we're joined by Mr. Victor Dolidzé, Ambassador Dolidzé, Head of Mission of Georgia to NATO. So welcome, gentlemen, and thank you for joining us. Before diving into our discussion very briefly, I'll tell you about more about our guests. So Mr. Khavieer Kolominna has served as the Deputy Permanent Representative in the Spanish delegation to NATO, while in 2014-2017, Mr. Kolominna held the position of the Head of Political Section at the Embassy of Spain in Tokyo. While Ambassador Dolidzé has served as the permanent representative of Georgia to the United Nations. He was the State Minister of Georgia on European and Euro-Atlantic integration. Prior to that, he held different state positions. He was a member of Georgian Parliament, and also from 2005 to 2009, he was ambassador in the Republic of Austria and the Republic of Hungary and permanent representative to OSCE. So once again, thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us. Today we're going to discuss NATO-Georgia relations. My first question, I'll now try to open discussion. My first question would be for you to try to assess current state of relations of Georgia and NATO. We have gone a long way together. Since early 90s, Georgia has been a member of, has joined NATO's Partnership for Peace program. Already in the beginning of 2000s, Georgia declared its wish to become NATO member. Then we all remember in 2008, Georgia was pledged that one day it would become NATO member. We have many different mechanisms of partnership. And most importantly, so far, Georgia has demonstrated that it can be a contributor to collective security with its participation in different missions, operations, including in Afghanistan, where it has shown that it's a reliable partner. So please, I would like first to ask Mr. Kolominna to assess current situation. Where do we stand? So thank you, and floor is yours, and then Ambassador Dolidzé.
Thank you very much. Could you hear me well?
Yes.
Yes, thank you very much. Thanks to the Georgian Center for Strategy and Development, Polish Embassy, and hello to my good friend, Ambassador Dolidzé, that I can see in the screen. Georgia, I think the sentence that summarizes it all is that Georgia is one of NATO's closest partners for various reasons. It is, as you know, one of the three aspirant countries, as you mentioned, the Bucharest decisions taken in 2008. It has contributed extensively to NATO operations over the years, and we share many security challenges. Political dialogue is actually very fruitful and frequent in the last months. Only the last year we've had the president of Georgia, Salome Zurabishvili, we had Prime Minister Irakli Garibashvili and the Defense Minister visiting NATO. We had always in the framework of the NATO-Georgia Commission, which is already something meaningful because it's only a few partners have specific platforms to relate with NATO. At the same time, and as you know, only in the last few months, the military committee paid a visit to Georgia, and myself as special representative, I was in Georgia mid-October, where I had excellent meetings with all of the different high authorities, the President, Prime Minister, the Minister for Foreign Affairs, the Minister for Defense, and the Parliament. And of course, the practical cooperation is not only broad, but I would actually say vibrant. You mentioned the SNGP, the substantial NATO-Georgia package, but I think, and I always said the same, there's no partnership tool that Georgia doesn't have. It is actually the whole range of tools that we have at the disposal of our partners that is being used by Georgia, and actually very well used. They go from education, training, meal to meal. There is the whole range of tools that are being used. So I end up this first introduction with the same sentence I used at the beginning. Georgia is clearly one of our NATO's closest partners, and the relationship we have with Georgia right now is a very good one. Thank you.
Thank you for your comprehensive answer. And now, please, Ambassador Dolice.
Yes, thank you very much, Sandro, and I appreciate GCSD, such a timely organization of this event. I would like to welcome good friend Khawir Kolominah, special representative, who is doing the really great job, despite the fact that in not so big period of time he's on this position, but he really could manage to visit Georgia and the regional countries almost, and had such an interesting and very encouraging, I would say, discussions with our high-level representatives of the government of Georgia, and very seriously preparing the ministerial, which we finished just very recently, last week in Riga, which was very important ministerial. Not because that all of us are facing now quite comprehensive, let's say, threats and challenges of the whole world, including NATO, of course, and including our region and Georgia as well. You remember that one of the main issues of discussions of the ministers was Black Sea security and the situation around and within the Black Sea, not only littoral state, but within the region. And we had a good opportunity to have a focus on Georgia and Ukraine, which are, from my point of view, quite in the same boat in terms of not only European, but Euro-Atlantic integration, first of all. And they are reliable, they are legible and very strong partners. I'm talking about Ukraine and Georgia, who are doing their not only great job for their countries, but at the same time parallelly contributing in the international security. And I think that aspirant Georgia has on many occasions demonstrated that it is a reliable and capable partner, which behaves like ally. And we have fought in Afghanistan, you remember, side by side with the allies, contributed substantially in that respect to ISAF and RSM. Before, we used to be in Iraq, as you know, even before in Kosovo. So this kind of contribution of Georgia toward the international security is really huge. You know that the decision was taken to complete the mission in Afghanistan, Georgia, as a host nation, support allied and partner countries as well. We, since the fall of Kabul, actually, we has been actively involved in the non-combat evacuation operation from Afghanistan as a regional hub, I would say. And since August 15, I guess more than 40 flights have been carried out on Tbilisi, Kabul-Tbilisi route, and up to 5,000 people have been evacuated. So we entered together, we adjusted together, and we left together Afghanistan. And we do hope that despite the difficulties which is going on now on the ground, with our help and support in the future, and international communities and NATO communities' strong involvement, Afghanistan will become in a more better situation when it is now after the leaving. At the same time, you know that we have very comprehensive program, so-called SNGP, Substantive NATO-Georgia Package, which is doing very well. As you know, we upgraded SNGP last year. And even now, Georgian MOD team is here, who are on a daily basis practically are cooperating with our NATO allies. Very soon, First Deputy Minister Chikovani will visit NATO to talk about very concrete, issues like communication with allies, secure communication, so-called SNGP, future contributors, and many other details in terms of, let's say, substantive, capable programs with NATO, who is building, which is building actually capacity, not only on a defense, but many areas. And the dynamic which has been mentioned by Khavir, and I fully agree with him, despite the pandemics, we had a lot of exchange of visits on a highest level. Only just last couple of years showed us that I received two prime ministers here of Georgia, president of Georgia, chairperson of the parliament, military committee visit has been mentioned, special representatives visit, etc., which is, this dynamic is always very important. And last not least, ministerial. I would say that it was really successful with ministerial. I started with that, and I want to say that this focus on Black Sea countries, particularly on Georgia and Ukraine, was very visible. First of all, ministers actually consulted with their Georgian and Ukrainian counterparts on many important and tangible details what's going on in the region now about Russian threat and occupation, and many other issues like, for example, 2030, in which in the process Georgia and Ukraine from the very starting point are involved, and they are doing quite a great job in that respect, including presenting their own ideas on Black Sea security, concrete issues and visions. And at the same time, we had the opportunity to discuss it within the civil society community and non-governmental sector in Riga, which was a huge conference and opened by Secretary General Stoltenberg and Minister Rinkevičius. And our first deputy ministers from Georgian side, Lasha Darsale, had an opportunity to appear among the audience and talk about those issues. And last not least, the document on the details of which I cannot talk today, but it's an aspirant countries document. It's a document about the future steps, political part of the document, as well as practical, pragmatic, concrete steps which has to be taken in the future in terms of interoperability building, capacity building in defense and many other sectors, and at the same time to increase our practical cooperation, which is crucially important, particularly in terms of, surveillance of air surveillance, information exchange on Black Sea between the parties, and many other issues. So we are on a highest level, I would say, of cooperation. Next year, we are preparing on Madrid summit, and I very much do hope that with our friend support, we will attend the meeting. This will be one of the, let's say, main pillars of next, let's say, strengthening of the alliance, and at the same time to strengthening the role of aspirant countries within the alliance. And this is a good possibility since we're gonna adapt, alliance should be adapt the document of 2030 as the new strategic concept of the alliance. So that's, I don't know how short I was, but I wanted to deliver, I mean, very shortly.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm ready for interaction. Thank you very much again for this opportunity.
Thank you for your very comprehensive answer. Now I'll move to the issue of membership. And Mr. Kolominna, you have rightly mentioned that there is almost no tool that Georgia doesn't have. And indeed, we have achieved so much together. But still, Georgia hasn't been granted formal NATO membership that would extend the collective security umbrella over Georgia. And some commentators very aptly noted that this is like an engagement without marriage. As a potential way to break this stalemate, some experts and former officials, including the NATO's former Secretary General, Andreas Fogh Rasmussen, have suggested to think of Georgia's NATO membership with a temporary suspension of Washington Treaty Article 5 over Abkhazia and Trinvali region, which we all know that is occupied by Russian Federation. And there are a few examples of this practice, and I won't go into details on that, but I would like to ask you, what could be potentially NATO's position on that? Would it somehow really break the stalemate when it comes to membership? Would it make Georgian integration into NATO easier? So please.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, let me first deal with what we think, and what I actually personally think that we should do right now. And I understand your question, and I will deal with it at the end. I think there is, of course, margin of maneuver, even though you have, as I said, and you repeated that, all the tools at your disposal, and you're using those very effectively. But I believe that first we need to focus and center as much as we can our cooperation on the strategic goals that we have for that. Those are the reforms of the defense and security sector. Second, the interoperability. Third, Georgia's resilience. Fourth, the maritime domain. And finally, the situation awareness. So that would be the practical cooperation where we are focusing on. Second, in order for us to do the work we want to do, we will also be looking very closely as how Georgia is effectively implementing the reforms that we believe are necessary. We've witnessed in that sense, and we have conveyed that message already to the Georgian authorities, that the polarized internal political scene sometimes doesn't help to send the proper message on some of the reforms we want to see. And I'm talking about the judiciary, the electoral reform, or the accountability on the security services. So that would be a second thing where we can actually deliver some more results and continue to progress in that sense. Third, as we mentioned, the measures we are taking to increase the relationship we have right now with our Austrian countries. Ambassador Dolice mentioned the report that was adopted by the ministers in Riga. It was an important step. It contains important measures in terms of practical cooperation, meal-to-meal cooperation, and political engagement. And in those, we will try, of course, to deliver. The mere fact that we had the meeting with Georgia in Riga demonstrate the will of the allies to go beyond what we have right now, but of course taking into consideration that it's very difficult to have a breakthrough in the open door policy, which we are very committed to. but we have to understand what's the current situation and how unbeatable sometimes the realities and the geostrategic circumstances are. On your specific question, and having said that there is some steps that could be taken as the ones I mentioned, my answer to the former Secretary General Rasmussen, to his suggestion, is a clear no. I don't think that is an option. To be honest, I don't even believe is very helpful in the current circumstances. NATO supports and have been supporting, and is one of the main messages that we've been conveying not only to Georgian authorities but to our adversaries. We support very clearly territorial integrity of Georgia within its recognized international borders. So actually, what we would like is actually to see progress on this unresolved conflict in the context of the Geneva international discussions. I was only last week in the OSCE ministerial. I had a good meeting with the Deputy Secretary General, Minister Zalkaliani, and Vice Minister Darshalia. We spoke about these issues, about the need for the Geneva international discussions to progress. But we believe we need to look first for an overall solution and don't try to look for shortcuts. Is not our policy. We consider that Georgia territorial integrity should be respected and is one of our main messages. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your answer. Now, you have mentioned strategic goals, and within that, you mentioned also maritime cooperation. So I would like to move to the Black Sea security. And we know that Black Sea security currently is kind of frontline in the competition between Russia and the West. And NATO and its members have strengthen their presence and efforts in the noted region to address Russia's increasing militarization and destabilizing activities. Over recent years, NATO ships have routinely operated in the Black Sea, usually patrolling the waters for around 2/3 of the year, while NATO exercises there send a strong signal to Russia and demonstrate NATO's intent to operate without constraint. As a pillar of the approach, we have witnessed advancement of NATO-Georgia partnership with an aim to enhance Black Sea security. And Georgia participates in NATO exercises in the Black Sea. NATO supports Georgia to strengthen its Coast Guard. Georgia participates in high-level consultations on Black Sea security, while the parties also exchange valuable information. In the region, Georgia can potentially be both, or we could say already is both provider and consumer of collective security. So what do you think, what further steps can be taken from both sides in order to project peace and stability in the Black Sea region and bring parties even closer together? And I would like this time to ask Ambassador Dolidzé to start with you, and then we'll switch to Mr. Kolominna. We can't hear you.
Do you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, sorry. Yeah, thank you very much for this very important question, Sandro. I agree with you. Black Sea is something on which NATO's, I would say, security identity is very much focused now, and this is very good because everybody realizes that last behavior of Russian side, how they are behaving in Georgia, in occupied territories, as well as eastern part of Ukraine, and now the concentration of more than 100,000 troops on the ground is really very damaging for the European security itself and the Euro-Atlantic area as an overall. So we really need more reactions for NATO community as well, and NATO understands this very well. That's why these kind of discussions was discussed, and there has been continued on last ministerial in Riga was crucially important. That's why you can find out in experts' document on 2030 many, I would say, very legible and fair and absolutely reasonable language on Black Sea security, on aspirant countries, on increasing cooperation with them. So, and we are really happy to see that. And as you remember, at the very starting point, Georgia and Ukraine has been involved in this process of preparing not only 2030 new strategic concept, but proposing our concrete ideas. How can we strengthen our cooperation and security within the Black Sea region? So more active and secure information exchange. This is very important. JCOM and the surveillance system on a Black Sea from the Georgian side, as you know, in Supsa is working very adequately and properly, I would say. More visible presence of NATO is very important, as you know, and when we are talking about the so-called port calls, more exercises are important part of this cooperation as well. In addition, we have recently submitted proposals, by the way, on how to enhance this cooperation. And we very much do hope that it will be paid due attention when 2030 strategic concept will be elaborated in the future as well. Georgia's engagement, for example, in tailored forward presents Article 5 exercises as well as the resilience boosting program, etc. There are many pragmatic, concrete proposals from our side. And now, you know, I would say that ball is on our NATO side. We are working with them and we are expecting for their concrete visions and proposals. And Georgia really can become the regional hub in not only evacuation but transportation system, and NATO can always rely on Georgia in that respect, because before Afghanistan operation started and after it has been ended, as I mentioned before, it was really very good kind of exercise why Georgia is such a flexible, convenient, cheap, and at the same time convenient, what is the most important, reliable partner and way for NATO in the future as well. That's in a few words what I can say on a Black Sea, and Javier will continue my observation. Thank you again.
Thank you, and please, Mr. Kolominah.
Thank you. Yeah, not that much to add to a very complete answer by Ambassador Dolice, but of course, the Black Sea region is a region of significant strategic importance for NATO, as it is the South Caucasus region in its entirety. And NATO in the Black Sea has responded to the increasingly assertive Russian behavior that you mentioned in the introduction by taking a few measures in order to enhance our deterrence and to support in particular the three allies that are Black Sea littoral states, Bulgaria, Romania, and Turkey, and in stepping up our engagement with Georgia and Ukraine. We've done that, as I mentioned before, using some of the practical cooperation and the mill-to-mill cooperation that we have extensively used in the last years, engaging with both the Georgian Defense Forces and the Georgian Coast Guard, including through exercises. There's been very specific examples of how we've been cooperating in the last couple of years on that, by supporting Georgia's defense reform efforts with expertise, and by ensuring, as the ambassador was mentioning, enhancing mutually our situational awareness. And this mutually is very important. This is not just a thing that we do in support of Georgia. Georgia is a very valued and fundamental partner for NATO, and is a two-way street relationship where, of course, we are supporting efforts by Georgia. We are helping Georgia as much as we can with regard to the very aggressive behavior by Russia. But at the same time, we are benefiting very much from what Georgia brings to the table. I didn't mention, I would just mention generally the contributions by Georgia to operations, and Ambassador Dolidzé mentioned specifically the ones in different operations, and we will always be very grateful for those, in particular the ones over the years in resolute support in Afghanistan, and in particular the ones during the evacuation. Of course, just maybe to end with, NATO sees the different security challenges with a broad view, and of course being Russia behind most of the challenges that come from that region, we have continued to increase our efforts in defense and deterrence. That is part of our dual track approach, the policy that NATO has to respond to Russia aggressive behavior. Those efforts in building up our defense and deterrence continue to be there. It's a defensive effort, just we need, of course, to be prepared to respond whenever that happens. And of course, at the same time, the dual track approach has a dual side of it, which is the option of maintaining the dialogue. We have been offering that to the Russians in many occasions. We continue to do that. The ball is clearly in their court. We have already made offers in many occasions to have conversations, and we are open to hold those. So all in all, NATO is responding in helping, as I said, the three allied littoral states of the Black Sea, in helping our partners, in contributing to their own security, and in responding with our dual track approach towards Russia aggressive behavior. Thanks.
Thank you once again for your comprehensive answer. So I would just add that we would be very happy to see, we hope to see more NATO, even stronger NATO in the Black Sea region in the coming years. So my next question would be, the world has been witnessing a geopolitical shift, best illustrated by Russian grab of territories both in Ukraine and in Georgia. And from more cooperative and liberal rules-based order, we see more competitive and hostile environment where the liberal democratic states are challenged by authoritarian rivals led by Russia and China. So in a response to that, Western states, NATO and West collectively have tried to adjust their strategy. And we have seen many features of this adjustment. We see that new approach is being developed, and that is best testified by NATO's engagement in the Black Sea region, or even more recently, more direct support to Ukraine, which we hope that will be strong and will continue. Still, it's hard to assess the level of the shift, and we hope that it will be best depicted in the strategic concept, which we'll see next year. So my question would be, in this neo-geopolitical world, where does NATO see Georgia's place? And that's question for Mr. Kolominna, and to Ambassador Dolidzé, where do you see Georgia's role? Where do you see Georgia's place in the new world? So please, Mr. Kolominna.
Thank you very much. Well, as you were saying, yes, this new vision is yet to be born. We are starting to work on that new vision that will be reflected on the new strategic concept that will be approved in the city where I was born, in Madrid, in the summer of next year. So we are starting the conversations towards that. And I believe that absolutely partners like Georgia will have a prominent place in it. And that is just a consequence of the relationship we have with Georgia, and just a consequence of the process that we have been witnessing within NATO in the last year, which started with the NATO 2030 process and the decisions that were taken within that framework by our heads of state and government in June this year. NATO 2030 process has as one of its main conceptual pillars the recognition that no single actor, no NATO, no single country can actually confront by itself the challenges and the threats that we are witnessing today. And in that sense, NATO, as much as any other actor of the international community, needs the help of its partners. We have a very good network of partners, but we need to build and to strengthen those partnerships in a two-way street, as I said before, in order for NATO to help those partners and for those partners to help NATO in confronting those threats and challenges. This is part of the essence of the NATO 2030 process and is a part of the essence that will be for sure reflected in the strategic concept. That is why we're actually right now in the process of starting to engage with our partners in how do they see this work moving on, how do they see their own ability to add value to the process and to the document that will be negotiated among allies in probably the second trimester of next year. Of course, within those partners, of course, we have plenty of them, and the partners that are more valued, the ones where we have a stronger relationship, and as I said, Georgia is with no hesitation one of those. We will have a closer interaction, and they will be present in that text in a more clear fashion. In those partners share with us not only the security challenges and the concerns that we've been mentioning in this conversation, but also something that will be fundamental in this strategic concept, and that is one of the other pillars of the NATO 2030 process, which is actually the reaffirmation of our common values, and in particular democracy and the rule of law. And those are elements that we share very clearly with a partner like Georgia. And in that sense, Georgia will be definitely present, not only in the process towards the concept, but in the concept itself as a main partner, and within the reflection of how partnerships could contribute to the efforts of NATO. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ambassador Dolice, please.
I really appreciate a special representative for such an answer and assessment of my country and the situation around it. And your role is really crucial in preparing of the concept and Georgian place in the document. And thank you very much, Special Representative, for that. As you know, Georgia has long ago made its choice to join the European families of democracies, and unfortunately it has been punished for it, as you know, for this choice. Importantly, my country and the countries of the region actually find themselves at the forefront of the competition of values of democracy versus authoritarianism. Unfortunately, the success and security, the democratic future of the Black Sea region is an important element of this battle. I'm sure about that. And it is a time to move forward with the political decision bringing Georgia to the membership in the alliance. But at the same time, alliance has its more, I would say, more broad, more, let's say, emerging challenges on a daily basis, actually. I remember when President Biden first time appeared before his colleagues at NATO, he mentioned three main elements as a threats and challenges to NATO and the international community, and of course, first of all, to the United States. They are first China rise. The second one was cybersecurity, and last not least, climate change. So this is very good example how challenging, how is actually the world. So this kind of new emerging disruptive technologies, and cybersecurity, this is not only kind of NATO and alliance challenge. This is for Georgia as well. I remember, Georgia was first country when Russia attacked, and they used the so-called hybrid force against Georgia in 2008, and then again many times. So we have a lot of examples. We are quite experienced, almost, unfortunately, with that, and we really can contribute in this respect as well. We have very interesting dialogue, which has been started with our friends and allies here at NATO and partners on this particular issue. Georgian proper agencies are involved in this process very actively, including MOD, MIA, and others as well, as you know. And we're going to continue in the same spirit, because today's new challenges and threats, among others, and quite elder ones as well, is of course #1 priority now for the whole NATO community. By the way, hereby I would like to add one very good information. Just today has been signed by Georgian Minister of Science and European Commissioner for the same issues, the agreement for science and technologies, and the EU's, let's say, involvement in this process and more support for my country. You remember Horizon 2020 program and many other scientific and technological programs, which has been, started in Georgia. This is the process of continuation of that, which is crucially important. Today we had meeting with the proper agency here at NATO as well. By this, I want to underline how important is this kind of institutional cooperation. And this is not about NATO only, because NATO and EU are becoming more and more, let's say, close partners in security issues. And Georgia can really find out its own place there. So today, 30 million euros has been granted from EU to Georgia for engineering, medical, military medical support, and many other transportation and some other issues as well, very technical, concrete support. So I have never remembered such a support in security, let's say. So security, science, technology, and others, which has been now enumerated by me, I think are very much coming closer by the new emerging and new threats and challenges for the whole world. And Georgia should be there. Georgia is there, and I'm pretty sure that we will continue our contribution in that respect as well. Thank you again.
Great. Thank you once again. So another question, Mr. Kolominna, you have mentioned the issue of democracy and the importance of democratic reforms. So I would like to once again highlight that NATO, apart from being a military alliance, is an organization with shared values, enshrining in itself democratic norms, respect for rule of law and human rights, to mention just a few. Considering that, how important is Georgia's adherence to democratic norms, especially given the ongoing political developments and the accompanying concerns? So please.
Yeah, thank you. As I said, I hinted to that a couple of times already, and I did that intentionally because it is a fundamental part of what NATO does. It is a political military organization, but our founding treaty, the Washington Treaty in 1949, has in its preamble these values, democracy, rule of law, has been fundamental. NATO's enlargement policy has aimed to foster democracy and rule of law, especially in the former Warsaw Pact countries. And the perspective of membership was actually used during the process of the last 20 years to accelerate the reforms that we were asking from these countries. It's been then a very positive accelerator, a very positive incentive for the countries that wanted to accede NATO, and it has greatly contributed to the stability and prosperity of Europe. As one of our current aspirants, allies therefore monitor very carefully, as I mentioned previously, Georgia's reform efforts. We have a document that is a political one that is called ANP, the Annual National Program, where we actually cover all those political elements. And in those, in that document, and as I said before, and that's what friends do, we are very transparent with our own friends. We follow very closely the political domestic scene, the polarization in your country, the fact that some of the decisions taken in the last 6 months, as for instance, the decision taken towards the 19th April agreement by the Georgian authorities to withdraw from it, was seen and witnessed with some concern. We continue to follow the efforts and the need to do more efforts on the judiciary reform, on media freedom of accountability, as I said before, of state security services. At the end, what we see is that in these processes, there are genuinely complicated for every partner, the accession processes. The fact that a polarized political scene could actually distract the government and the authorities from the much needed reforms in these areas. So we follow very closely the situation. We try to support as much as we can the efforts. We maintain, that is why we maintain a very close relationship with Georgian authorities. When I saw Minister Zalkaliani and Vice Minister Darshalia just a few days ago, last week, we again spoke on these issues. It's not something that we hide from our Georgian friends. On the contrary, we speak very openly on this, and we expect the Georgian authorities to progress as we would like them to do. It is fundamental. It is a fundamental part of the NATO 2030 process, and it will be a fundamental part of the new strategic concept. Thanks.
Thanks for that comment. So I would add that hopefully with the support of our Western friends, Western allies, NATO, the parties in Georgia will come to the mentioned agreement, and they will wholeheartedly continue the reforms which have been started for a long time now. So we're coming closer to the finish line, and the next question I would like to ask both of you, I think very important one, is that Georgia's determination to become a NATO member is largely driven by not only by political elites, but by strong public will, which is very much testified by opinion surveys. Namely, for over years, more than 70% of Georgia's population have consistently endorsed the country's Euro-Atlantic aspirations, and I'm very proud for that. In the light of Russian propaganda and disinformation, though, the constant support is not guaranteed, as malign narratives and NATO skeptic discourse try to undermine the public resolve. So there, I think it's very important to wisely manage expectations. So taking the risk into account, what do you think is the right strategy when it comes to communication? How important is to keep the positive dynamics in the NATO-Georgia relations? And I would like to start this question first with Ambassador Dolice. What's your expectation? What would you like? What would you like to see from NATO? And Mr. Kolominna, I would like to ask, what's your recommendation for Georgia when it comes to this issue? So please, Ambassador Dolice. We can't hear you.
Sorry. This is a very important question. Actually, I fully agree with you. We call it strategic communication, as you know, and this is something on which we are focused very much during last decade, probably. Why EU? Why Georgia? Why NATO? Why Georgia is striving toward the European and Euro-Atlantic community? Why democracy? It's so important, as has been mentioned by Special Representative. NATO is a value-based organization. And when we are talking about NATO, we are talking about democracy, rule of law, judiciary system, and many, many others. I mean, because without democracy, you cannot handle any kind of threats, particularly when you are talking about the, let's say, political, military kind of organization like NATO is. So this is important, and I'm really, as I said, hope that our future democratization is unwavering, and there is no question about the necessity of that. We will make more steps, and this is not about only, you know, political establishment or government only. This is about responsible opposition. This is about society, and in this respect, as you know, strategic communication is crucial from my point of view. You know that we have strategic communication action plan, such a conceptual document which has been adopted by the government many years ago. NATO and EU membership is endorsed by the Constitution of Georgia, which is at the same time very important. And we have to provide this and deliver this information to the whole Georgian nation why we are going through that. Because Georgia, it has been, and everybody is saying that it was decision of Georgian people and society of Georgia, not only of any, let's say, single political party or political forces in the country. So strategic communication is important tool. We have here a very close cooperation with strategic communication department here at NATO and by Babrai's office, who is the Assistant Secretary General on these particular issues. We will have next year, let's say, public diplomacy forum. This is Georgia NATO Public Diplomacy Annual Forum, which is very important mechanism of cooperation on those particular issues of strategic communication within the country. And we are trying really to use all these opportunities, you know, and all this mechanism with NATO. And these guys are really assisting us in that respect as well. Again, I think that today's our conversation and your questions, Sandro, were really important for us, for our brainstorming, exchange of views, and for the country, first of all, and was very timely. I once again want to use this opportunity and you know, hope for successful next ministerials. And what is the most important in the nearest or in the, if you wish, the long-term future, of course, next summit of heads of states of NATO. Thank you very much again.
Thank you. Mr. Kolominah, please.
Yes, thank you very much. Well, let me start by saying that we welcome very, very much the strong public support for NATO membership. It's actually a pleasure to receive such a support. When I was in Tbilisi, I had a meeting at the parliament where with representatives from both the government and from the different parties. It was a very interesting meeting, and we talked today about the polarized political situation. Well, in that meeting, what wasn't polarized, it was the absolute unanimity around the support to NATO and the support to NATO's membership. So I could actually believe that NATO could be at least one element that could help in making the relationship between the government and the opposition more constructive. But on what would be my recommendations on public communication? Well, I think we are already receiving a lot of support, so I think public communication is clearly working, as Ambassador was mentioning the many efforts that Georgia, together with NATO, is doing. But I would say, first, I think we should always stress how fruitful the cooperation between Georgia and NATO is, and being absolutely conscious of the fact that the end goal is, of course, for Georgia to become a member of the alliance, and we stick to the decisions taken in 2008. We should be very clear on the many benefits that cooperation is already having and has already brought to Georgian society. That would be first element. Second element, and as I said before, the need to continue performing in the many reforms that we believe Georgia has to do. And that would actually help for the audiences to be better informed. And when you're better informed, you are less susceptible to be disinformed. And we know what are the efforts of misinformation coming from the Russians. And third, I believe that there is, of course, always a margin of maneuver to do things a little bit better. And in this case, probably we could actually continue to try to reach the least supportive part of the population on NATO's membership, including, for instance, the non-Georgian speaking minorities. But let me end by saying that I would love to have, whenever I do something, a 70% of approval rate. It's an amazing support that we are receiving from Georgia. So it would mean that you always have a 30% to get beyond that 70%, but I think the efforts we've been doing are great. And this is, for instance, a good example of it. I think contributes to the awareness of what we're doing, to the work we are doing together, to the excellent level of the cooperation between NATO and Georgia. And in that sense, I would also like to thank you very much for having me here. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen, so much we took, I think, a lot of time from you. So let me once again express my gratitude for joining us, for having this important discussion, and hope that we will have more discussions in the future. Before leaving, I would like to make an announcement that our talks, our NATO talks, will continue, and on 18th of December, you can follow us. We will have another special speaker, Dr. Jamie Shea. I think that should be very interesting as well. And please follow us. So once again, thank you so much. Wish you all the best. And until the next time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good luck. Good luck.
Good luck.